Hi, and welcome to the third video in the series of building cost-effective integrations with Apex, ORDS, and the Oracle database. This time we're going to be talking about receiving data from other systems. So we're going to look at three scenarios. We'll start with webhooks and callbacks, then look at mobile apps, and then look at inbound data integrations. So let's start with callbacks. So in the example on the left, we have a callback set up in Jira. And the way you can do that is to tell Jira when certain events happen in Jira to call out to a web service. So in this case, we're asking Jira to call out to our ORDS web service whenever a Jira ticket gets created. Then behind our REST API, we have our PL SQL and SQL code to perform the actions we want to perform based on that new ticket. On the right, we're looking at a callback. Callbacks are similar to webhooks, other than the fact they're usually initiated from our side. So in the case of running a Fusion ESS job, which is a background scheduled process, we call an API in Fusion to start that ERP ESS job. And while we call that REST API, we pass along the URL of the ORDS service we want Fusion to call once that job is completed. So that Fusion job then runs. When it finishes running, it sends the details, the status of that job back to that REST endpoint, and then we can process that in our local database. A more comprehensive webhook example is perhaps SendGrid. So SendGrid is some SaaS software that allows you to send emails and track marketing campaigns, that kind of thing. So we can call the SendGrid web service from Apex and ask it to send a bunch of emails. We can also configure SendGrid to send callbacks to an ORDS endpoint whenever certain events happen to those emails. So for example, we could have a message back whenever the email is delivered successfully, or when somebody opens the email, or even when someone clicks a link within the email. That way we can track the emails we sent with the emails that were actually delivered or opened in our local database. Other webhook and callback examples that I've been involved with, one is QuickBooks, so we'll see a demo shortly of making updates to customers in QuickBooks and then getting a message back to our ORDS web service. Another interesting example is OCI events. So if we take the case of Object Store in OCI, you can set up an event so that whenever a file is loaded to an Object Store bucket, OCI calls a REST web service. So this is great for loading files, for example, so that whenever that file hits Object Store, it calls your ORDS web service to tell you that file's been loaded. You can then call back to Object Store, grab that file and load it into your database. I've also been involved with other examples like Microsoft Teams webhooks and GitHub webhooks. Some things you need to know about webhooks, they're near real time, so they don't happen in real time. That software that sends that webhook signal does not necessarily send it in real time, but it's usually pretty close. They usually require a HTTPS endpoint, and all of our ORDS servers should be running on HTTPS. And you need to verify the caller. So in the Jira example, Jira will call your ORDS web service, but you don't know it's Jira calling your web service. So you need to authenticate and make sure that Jira authenticates with your web service. So Jira happens to have the option to create OAuth 2 credentials. So then ORDS, you set up an OAuth 2 client. Jira will then call that client to get a token and then call the web service with the callback information. But other webhooks may use shared keys. But either way, you want a way of making sure whoever's calling your ORDS endpoint system you think it is. The second scenario is mobile applications. So in this example, we have a number of mobile apps that are calling ORDS web services to put data into and get data out of our Oracle database. And a specific example of this that I was involved in was with a manufacturing company. So they had several manufacturing sites and they would capture readings from material which they'd processed and then sync those readings to Oracle eBusiness Suite through an ORDS web service. They also used that ORDS endpoint to grab information from EBS like items and customers. So ORDS is a great way of interacting with mobile apps. The final scenario we'll look at is inbound data integration. So an example of that is where I did integration with Autodesk Vault. So this is software that engineers use to design and work on items and bills of materials for products that are going to be manufactured. Once they've completed the design for a product, they call the ORDS web service, and behind the scenes of that web service, it's calling EBS public APIs to create and update items and bill of materials in Oracle eBusiness Suite. Other inbound data integration examples are AP invoices from OnBase to eBusiness Suite via ORDS, shipping notifications from a third-party carrier to call ORDS to let us know that deliveries had been scheduled or shipped. And finally, inventory adjustments. So Oracle has a SaaS product called Oracle Field Service Cloud, and we would send inventory updates from Field Service Cloud when technicians got back from the end of their day, and whatever parts they'd used was sent back to EBS via an ORDS web service call. So let's look at a demo now where we're going to show from QuickBooks updating a customer and see that message getting sent back to our ORDS web service. So in QuickBooks, there's a developer account that you can get where you can set up webhooks. So in this case, I'm asking QuickBooks to call this REST endpoint, which is an ORDS web service, and also to send this verifier token. And we can use that verifier token to make sure that it really is QuickBooks that's called our endpoint. Once you have that established, you can tell QuickBooks what events you want it to send you. So in this case, we're asking it to send us events when a customer is created, merged, deleted, or updated. So if we go ahead into our QuickBooks sandbox, I'm going to look at all the customers that we have. I'm going to make a change to this customer, Alexa Inc. I'm just going to add a period to the end of that company name and save it. So that's now called our ORDS web service. So I have an app that is tracking the webhook events. And you can see I just now received this webhook event. And the way QuickBooks works is it sends you the ID of the entity that was changed, what you did to that entity, so in this case we were updating it, and what the entity was, and when exactly that change was made. So for QuickBooks, if we wanted to sync that customer data with our local database, we'd have to make a callback to QuickBooks to grab the other fields related to that customer that we're interested in. On the ORDS side, so we have this post handler, and this is the URL that we set up in QuickBooks. And this post handler is calling this PL SQL API with that verifier token and the payload, the body of the web service request that we just saw. And then we're returning out the HTTP status. So if we want to take a quick look at that code, we'll go and have a look at that package. So I'm setting the returned HTTP status to 200 by default, which is a success. And then I'm passing that payload that came from QuickBooks. And that has an array of notifications. So I'm then looping through that array and populating a PL SQL record type with the fields. So the name, the ID, the operation, and the date. In this case, I'm just populating a table, but you could be performing any other processing behind the scenes. So that ends the demo, and that ends this web video. Next time, we're going to be talking about sending data to other systems.